Margie, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I know in your bio you talked about being a mermaid, so I guess it's apropos that you swam and all of that today. So, before we get into all of those layers of who you are, I want to begin with living through the pandemic was quite a thing, and it created a lot of momentous changes for all of us. How much of living through that time period has influenced and affected the way that you live your life today?
Well, it influenced quite a bit. And I have the whole story about how I became a mermaid and all that kind of stuff. And that actually happened right before the pandemic and right into the pandemic. So if you're wanting to talk about that, I can do that.
Let's do it. Let's segue, and then I'll just kind of take it from there, and we'll peel back the layers.
Okay, great. So this is how the timing worked. Okay. So everything started right around when I turned 49. Okay, so you're a guy, I'm a girl, and turning 50 really isn't that fun if you're a typical woman, and anyone who says it isn't a big deal probably has no dysfunction in their family, doesn't want to lose weight, any of that. I was really looking at my 50th birthday with dread. I didn't want it to be the beginning of the end, whatever. And this was right before the pandemic. Okay. So I was trying to figure out what to do for my 50th birthday because everyone wanted to do things like a party or a trip or whatever, which was to me kind of boring, been there, done that. Then I decided to actually come up with a plan for my 50th birthday. And that would be that each month I wanted to do a new experience. So a new experience with one or more of my friends. And it didn't have to be wild and crazy, although some of them were. It could just be pretty tame, but it had to be something new, and I wanted to do it with friends. So my friend named it the Margie Project, and the Margie Project is what it became. So what happened was I ended up doing different experiences. Of course, the first thing was learning to ride a motorcycle because, I had to do that. And that was with my husband. He wanted to do that. And then I had a couple of spiritual ones, like going to a numerologist, which is kind of like a psychic, but they use numbers to try and figure out everything about you.
Yeah.
And health related, which was running a 5K, and then relationships. So I met some long lost family members. I had a high tea with a group of friends. So this was all kind of happening. So what happened then was during this time, I was training for my 5K. And this is Florida. And at the time, it was August. So it was really hot and sweaty.
Yeah.
And the humidity was just crazy. We had had a pool for a very long time and we looked at it a lot, but we never really used it. I don't know why, but I just had this crazy flash right after I was hot and sweaty that I just really wanted to take off my clothes and jump into the pool. And I'm really glad I did because it was nirvana for me. I stayed in an hour. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't use my cell phone. I didn't have to listen to music. I was just hanging out. It was a really me in the pool in a perfect day.
Yeah.
And then I realized that I love the pool. I'm a Piscean, all that kind of stuff. So when I was in the water, I started thinking about mermaids. And then one day I had an inspiration and I decided to identify myself as a 50-year-old mermaid, which I didn't really know much about mermaids at the time.
Yeah.
But what I knew was that they seemed to be free spirits. They did what they wanted. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to do what I wanted, take control of my life, whatever. So I started calling myself the 50-year-old mermaid. And when people started asking me about it, I started saying that I believe women could lead their best lives over 50 on
Yeah.
their own terms. And then I created a Facebook group and I started thinking about things. And then this was right before the pandemic. And it just so happened that part of this year of reinvention sparked some other learnings. And one of those learnings was that I was burnt out in my PR business,
Yeah.
which I had had for over 20 years. And I wanted to shift to writing full time. Now, literally, this was probably like 5 or 6 months before the pandemic hit. And I had no idea the pandemic was coming. Obviously, none of us did.
Yeah.
But during right before then, I had made the decision. I closed down my PR business and I just started to shift to writing full time. And that's when the pandemic hit. So it was kind of interesting. uh, I had been working from home for, again, over 20 years. So that part wasn't different during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But writing during the pandemic, which if I had known better, I probably would have been really scared. But luckily, I didn't know any better. And luckily, people were reading stuff because they were home, right? So there were projects, and I had always been a good marketer. That had been my original corporate job. So of course, I had to learn to market myself in a new way as a writer instead of a PR person. But I was scouring places to do that. And on Twitter, right at the beginning of the pandemic, Business Insider, one of the top editors at the time, posted that they were looking for a couple people to do like quick turnaround COVID stories.
Yeah.
So I just happened to get lucky. I didn't have a lot of experience, but I got a couple of assignments from them. And then that led to me writing for things like Parade. And then I had also started doing triathlons. So this was for Livestrong, and then eventually the New York Times and Fortune and the AARP type publications. So basically, I actually had a good shift during the pandemic. It actually helped me launch my business.
So, who's been a hero? Who's been that inspiration for you in this shift and just in general in your life?
Well, my mom was always my biggest cheerleader. My mom was also a writer and an author. And I remember every time I needed to write, now I didn't go to school for journalism. I went to school for business. Okay. So I literally had no formal journalistic training. But my mom ended up being, excuse me, my mom ended up being my editor
Yeah.
for probably the first 2 years that I wrote because I was learning as I went. Really, I was really good at marketing myself, but sometimes I take on things and I was like, wow, okay, mom, I need your help. So she was my biggest cheerleader. She was so thrilled I was writing because that's what I was always supposed to do, but I just wasn't ready till I was 50. And then when I got my first article in the New York Times, she was so excited. She was saying, she's like, you've made it now. Of course, that's not true, but it was very exciting. She was so happy.
Yeah.
So she was really always there for me.
Yeah.
And then I had another shift in 2023 regarding my mom. So on February 21st, 2023, my mom died of pancreatic cancer. She had been my best friend. I mean, I have a husband, I have a daughter, I have a life, but my mom was a single parent. I was an only child. We were best friends. And the pancreatic cancer was very unexpected. It was very sudden. I was gutted. And this was, again, a couple years into my writing journey. And at the time, my mom had written her first adult novel. It was in first draft form. She had written years ago in the 80s and 90s some young adult novels that were published actually by major New York City publishers.
Yeah.
But she was long since retired, and she had been going to writers' groups for years and writing this novel. She had this novel. So right before she passed away, I made her a promise that I would get her novel published and that I would really finish it and get it ready to be published, which was kind of tricky because she wasn't interested in me self-publishing it. So I knew nothing about the fiction world. I really had to figure out everything. So what I had to do was, right after she passed away, which was soon after that, I knew the novel needed some work. And I figured, well, I've been a writer for a few years. I'm a pretty good writer. I'm a good reader. I could probably make a few changes. And how hard is it to find a publisher or an agent and all that kind of stuff? But I was totally clueless and it was ridiculous. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So what I had to do was I ended up taking 3 months off right after she passed away. And I cleared the decks. I put all my writing projects on hold. I told them to hang on. I needed to learn how to write fiction and how to write a novel. During that time, I listened to podcasts. There are quite a few good ones on writing.
Yeah.
Researched information online, and I even hired a developmental editor because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to be more focused. I knew I had a timeline. So by the end of that time, I had added about 20,000 words, new characters, a tighter timeline, conflict, and all that kind of stuff. So when the novel was finished, I had to spend a year pitching agents and publishers. And I honestly was not having very much luck.
Yeah.
But then I stumbled across a new small press. In this particular press, it's called Sibylline Press, only publishes books by women authors over 50, which to me was an amazing fit because the book features characters that are over 50
Yeah.
and how they find a life. So it was a really great fit. And really, to this day, I racked my brain and I can't figure out how I found out about it. So I'm thinking mom might have guided me to it.
Sure.
And the long story short is that this past Friday, January 31st, 2025, Sibylline Press published the Cabernet Club, which is co-authored by my mom, Rona S. Zable, and myself, in ebook and print, and the audiobook will be available in late March 2025.
Very cool. That's wonderful. So, what was your dream when you were a kid? What did you want to grow up and become?
Isn't that funny? I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Okay.
I didn't I didn't know what kind. I love selling Girl Scout cookies. I wanted to make money because we grew up without a lot of money. So I think that might have had something to do with it. And I always wanted freedom.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something where people weren't in control of me, but I was really kind of all over the map for a long time.
So, as a writer, what was your favorite book growing up, or even now? What was the perennial book that stands out?
Oh gosh, I love so many books. I think growing up, I loved all of the Anne of Green Gables series.
Yeah.
To me, they're wonderful.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, as an adult, I really respect the writing and enjoy the writing of Elizabeth Strout, who wrote all of the Olive Kittredge series. And I also happen to love all genres. I love thrillers and mysteries, all kinds of things. If I can find characters or an interesting plot, anything like that, I'm all about it.
So, is that your mom behind you there by the cake?
Yeah,
That's
that's
great.
her.
That's a great picture.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's on the book too. Yep, she's an inspiration. Everyone loved her. She was charming and wonderful. And
Yeah. That's
yeah,
a great picture. So, since this has happened, this has to feel cathartic, like a full, like and I'm going to present it to you this way. I remember after I turned 50, and like you said, I think it's different for the male and female
yes,
brains.
yes.
So I was with my daughter, my stepdaughter just turned 18, and we
Uh-huh.
went to this park in Branson called Silver Dollar City, and we were at a ride called the Time Machine, and there was all these
Okay.
clocks ticking around me, and at one point she looked up and she said, "At 50, what's the revelation? What have you realized about being alive?" And the big thing that came to me was this: it's all about like tying up loose ends. Life is this big full circle event, and you come back one way or another. Whether you deal with something from your past, or you do something that you always wanted to do, or well, all of these things that you did for that month. So my question to you is this: obviously, this work that was not completed by your mother, and
Mhm.
you're a part of it. Do you feel like there's like a circle that was complete, a cathartic kind of conclusion to something that should have been done, but has been done in this magnanimous way now that she's gone?
Yeah, I think for many years I kept telling her that the book was a gift to the world and it really needed to be out there because it's really about empowering older people and empowered aging. And it's just such a good message to put out there, especially with so many negative messages. So I kept feeling like it needed to be there and it just wasn't happening. So I feel like, yeah, it's full circle, but knowing me and knowing my mom, I also feel like there was a push by my mom that wanted me to really move in this direction because what it did was instead of making this a one and done project, which is how I originally expected it to be, I ended up really falling in love with the characters. And I've actually plotted out book 2 and book 3 in the series. So this is actually becoming part of my new purpose, which includes continuing to carry her torch and my torch about you can do anything when you get older. The rest of your life can be the best of your life, all those kind of messages, but also helps me in my continued journey.
So, of all the people that exist on the planet, who embodies that mermaid spirit that you would love to meet and hang out with and talk to?
Well, I met one, and her name, she's the Iron Nun. Have you ever heard of her?
Uh-uh.
So amazing. I've written about her actually.
Yeah.
So Sister Madonna Booter is, gosh, now she must be 94, give or take. But I interviewed her a few years ago. And after age 50, as a nun, she started running. And then she started going into races. And then she started doing triathlons. Then she started doing Ironmans. And she did Ironmans probably into her 80s. And I met her when she was in her 90s a few years ago doing a triathlon. So I was just so impressed with the fact that she was a working nun and somehow had gotten into running. She had never done it before. Just on a fluke, she started running one day and was good at it and has such a great outlook on life and such like a compassionate person and also such a role model. And such a good story because I love
Yeah.
a good story.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, she embodies everything that is possible.
Yeah. So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 18-year-old version of you. You can give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart on that younger version of you?
Well, first, I'd say buy Apple stock.
Right. Of course.
Okay. I have to do that.
Of
Okay.
course.
And then, sorry, but yes, I've thought
Yeah.
about this before, and someday I might write a novel about going back in time. I think that's really, we think about that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I think also I was always in a hurry to figure things out, and sometimes you just got to live life
Yeah.
before you can figure it out. I'm like, what is my purpose? I would always ask myself that in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, what is my purpose? Sometimes you just got to live
Yeah.
and you might stumble across your purpose. And maybe there is no such thing as a purpose. Maybe your purpose is to bring joy to the world or to do what you're supposed to do, but just live your life in the present and enjoy everything and be open to possibilities.
Yeah. So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Best advice I've ever gotten. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is just ask. Ask for anything and everything, even if you're scared, even if you think you sound like relentless, which I've been called, even if you think it's embarrassing, you need to ask and you always need to try to find a way to get something done.
So, of everything you've accomplished and evolved into at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
This book, without question, because it fulfills the promise I made to my mom. It honors her. It also helped me step into a new direction. It helped me learn to do something new. I probably wrote about 40% of the book.
Yeah.
So it's something we can do together. It's something that everyone really loves to embrace. People love this story.
Yeah.
And it's a heartwarming story because it could be all about grief when someone passes away. And I was grieving and I'm still grieve, but it's a way to turn that into something positive, which is something really important. I think people want to hear.
Keeps that legacy going for sure. Um,
Yeah,
so let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you. Family,
yeah,
friends, everyone that gets the book, everyone that knows you, but you run
right.
the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Gosh, what a great question. I think I'm a person who, and I have shared this with some people, I'm mostly in my head. I'm happiest when I'm thinking up ideas and stories and in marketing and all kinds of things like that. So I'm present with people and I'm fun to be around and funny, but I really spend a lot of time in my head, and that's where a lot of things get done.
So now that you've crossed this summit of getting into 50 as a
Mhm.
woman, if you could give advice to anybody out there that's at 48, 49, knocking on the door, what now that you've been there and you've made changes and you did significant things in preparation, what advice would you dispense on those that are getting there?
I would say I didn't take my health and fitness seriously until 50. And now I know that health is the true wealth, especially as I see myself getting older and other people getting older. If you don't have your health, you have nothing. So for me, health and fitness are literally my priority. They're first on my calendar every day. And I think if we need to go through life, if we want to live a long time, there's no point in living if we're not healthy. So take care of your health. Mhm.
That's a great advice. So if anyone wants to pick up this wonderful book, they want to reach out to you, they want to know more, any of the good business in your world, where do they go?
So my website has all of the above, and that website would be margiezfisher.com, and I'll spell it. It's Margie, Z like zebra, Fisher, Fisher.com.
Okay. Excellent. Margie, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. What an inspirational tale. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Best of luck. Okay, we're out. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.